Let's start exploring texture paint mode. For the presentation purposes, we'll use a simple cube. Now we're in the Layout tab, so to be able to paint a texture on our object, we need to press Tab and choose the Texture Paint mode. As I mentioned in the previous course, to have this menu that allows to access all these modes quickly, you need to enable Tab for Apply menu in Preferences in the Key Map section. It would definitely come in handy while switching to Object mode and Texture Paint mode often. Alright, so now when we're in the Texture Paint mode, the first thing we probably want to do is to paint something. We use this solid shading and we see that our cube is pink, and after trying to paint the cube, nothing changes. And below the viewport, we're getting the message saying that the textures are missing. If you wouldn't have the material on our object, it would say that both materials and textures are missing. So to add the textures we can actually paint on, we need to click on the texture slots at the top center above the viewport. With the material mode selected, we are able to create one of the PBR maps like base color or roughness. If you would switch the mode to single image, we would be able to just create an image, use existing one, or open an image. We will stick to the PBR workflow now, so let's stay with the material mode and click this little plus icon and add a base color. Now we can change some options for the texture. The default ones are okay for now, so now we click Add and our object change color to the color of our new texture. Let's switch to the Shading tab real quick, and you can see that the texture is automatically connected to the principled shader. We can go back to the Layout tab. Now we are able to paint our cube. We'll go through the basic options, starting with color. To change the color, we need to click on the top left. Let's change it to green, and we can paint with green. Next to it, we have the secondary color, which we will set to blue, and to paint it, we need to press Ctrl and left click. We can switch them by clicking X, which you might know from Photoshop or Krita. Next to it, we have the blend mode. So if we will choose any of these, the brush will behave accordingly to the blend mode option. But besides of the default blend modes we already know, we also have two more options, Add and Erase Alpha. By clicking on Erase Alpha, you can see I'm now painting the transparency on our image and removing the alpha. And now let's switch to Add Alpha, and you can see I'm painting the alpha back and removing the transparency from the image. Let's change the blend mode back to mix. Next up, we have radius and strength, so we can resize our brush and change the strength of the brush stroke. These little icons next to the radius and strength allow us to use the tablet pen pressure sensitivity, so if you have the tablet, it's good to have them turned on. You can access all these three options, blending mode, radius, and strength, by clicking right mouse button or the button assigned for the pen to be the right mouse button. We can also press F to set the radius and Shift F to change the strength. You can accept the chosen radius and strength by clicking or tapping the tablet with a pen. The maximum strength or radius of the brush, no matter if we have the pressure sensitivity on or off, is set by the slider or with two shortcuts I mentioned a moment ago, or by clicking right mouse button. So if I set the strength to 0.5 and radius to 100 on the sliders, I can't go above that even pressing my pen really hard. Now let's set the strength to 1 and radius to 50 using Shift F for strength and F for radius, and you can see that the values changed on the sliders too. Next option that will help us to change the brush stroke is fall-off, and you can find it here. It describes the gradual fade out of the edges of the brush. Let's change it to something else, like constant. And you can see that the edges of our brush are now very hard. And now let's switch it to custom. And we can see that we can make a custom curve. So let's drag the left point lower to the right and paint. Now we can see that in the middle we have less colored spot because that reflects our fall-off. Starting from the left we have center of our brush, and on the right we have edges of our brush. Let's switch it back to smooth and go to another options. Very useful option is accumulate, and you can find it under the brush drop-down. Let's set the brush strength to 0.1, and you can see that you can build up the intensity by using the brush a few times, but every time painting a new stroke. With accumulate, which we quickly turn on now, we can do a similar thing, but with painting a continuous stroke. Remember that with this option turned on, we're painting until the strength will be 1, so if we will paint in one spot, even with strength set to 0.1, after some time we'll achieve full opacity of the brush. Let's turn it off for now. We did all of that in the layout workspace, but if we want to manage the textures we're painting on, we should go to the texture paint workspace. So let's go out of the texture paint mode here. Our textures disappeared, and if you want to see them, we should go to the shading options and choose texture from the color section. But it's just the layout, so we don't need it here. So let's change it back to material and now switch to the texture paint tab. Now we can see the texture we painted on the left and the painted cube on the right. We can paint the textures in the 2D view as well as in the 3D view. All the brush settings we talked about a few minutes ago are still at the top of the viewport as well as in the tool properties on the right. It's up to you where you want to change them. They will change everywhere else automatically. You can also hide the tool settings by right-clicking on the header. And I will hide it from 2D and 3D space. Feel free to customize the tool settings to your liking. I will be accessing the tools from the right panel. Now let's talk about adding another painting slot. We still have access to the textures list on the top of the viewport, so let's add another texture, for example, metallic. The default options are okay, so let's press add. Now we can paint on the metallic texture. I will choose the white color as the metallic texture should have only 2 colors or some grays if we want to artistically cheat, and paint on the box. We can change the viewport shading to material and we can see that the area we painted is now metallic. One thing I found helping while painting different PBR textures is to add a shader editor below the 2D view. So let's drag it upwards from the bottom corner and choose the shader editor, and we can see all the textures connected to the principal shader. It's super useful because you can also switch the texture you're painting on by clicking on it. Now it's metallic, but let's click on the second one and we can paint on our base color again. Remember that depending on which space you're painting in, the texture on the second will update after you let go of your brush. Very useful option we see below the color picker is the color palette. We can create a new palette, name it, for example, wood, and then click this plus icon and drag the chosen color from the color circle to the created palette. You can add as many colors as you want, and it's nice to have a palette like this. For wood, I would go with some browns, lighter and darker, to have a nice blend between the colors. To help with blending, we can also use sampling by pressing Shift X and hovering over the color we want to sample. Now I can decrease strength a little bit and blend the colors. If you want to add sampled color to the palette, you can press Shift X and left click and it automatically adds it to the active palette or creates a new one. If you want to change the UVs during painting, we can go to the Edit mode on the 3D space, but we can't change anything on the 2D space on the left, so we need to switch the image editor to UV editor, and now we can edit them. For now, let's switch back to the texture paint workspaces in both of the viewports. Try to practice a bit with using different colors, brush sizes you've learned in this lesson. In the next one, we'll talk about brushes system.